So coming up on Mountain Hermeneutics, we're talking about the Epistle of Barnabas. No Billy Carson, not the Gospel of Barnabas, the Epistle of Barnabas. Uh, what is the Epistle of Barnabas, you might ask? We'll keep it right here. We'll let you know. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
That's one too many racial slurs from Brian.
I'm sorry. Did I derail us with my fourth wall break?
A little bit.
Sorry.
Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, to include if you want to see our lovely faces here on YouTube. You can find Mount Hermeneutics simply by searching for, Mount Hermeneutics. And if you find it, go ahead and subscribe. I mean, if you're going to listen to it, you may as well subscribe and see, where we go next. And then also like and all the things that help us out, to help you out, to get you to learn things like the Epistle of Barnabas, which many of you probably thinking, yeah, I've read it 17 times. And the other ones are like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. But if it's your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Matt. That's Brian. Fellas, what's happening?
I'm trying to decide if I'm more thrown off by the fact that there could be somebody who's read the Epistle of Barnabas 17 times, or that we were only 4 seconds in before Billy Carson caught a stray. I don't know.
Well, just in case somebody read, both, or got their information from a Billy Carson,
right?
And got whooped up on by Wes Huff, who is everybody's hero for some reason.
Saint Wesley.
Saint Wesley.
Saint Wesley of Canada.
What are you talking about?
What's good, Brian? What are you up to?
I think,
Brian, you're muted somehow.
We've been talking for half an hour.
How's that?
Yes.
That's much better.
Yeah. I had to clear my throat while Dre was doing the intro, and
that was nice of you.
Yeah. And then I guess I forgot to switch it back on, although I thought I did, which makes me wonder if I wasn't clearing my throat over your intro. So
no, you weren't.
Sorry about that if I was. Yeah. So how you guys doing?
Better now.
Better now since you saw Superman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my life is turned around since I saw it. I was blinded by the light.
But by the hope.
Yeah.
For the hope for other people.
Yeah.
It's
good.
For our species.
By the sugar-coated, nihilistic, ironic hope.
Or the idea that no matter what your parents are or what they think and how they raise you, like, you have your own choices and you become your own man, and the goodness that you do in the world is up to you, not up to your circumstances.
Thank you, Jonathan Kent.
That's a way to read it.
That was it was really heavily stated, actually. Like, I feel like Pa said this like in those exact words.
Sure, but I don't want to ruin. I mean, I can't talk about it without spoiling it.
That's fair.
So I'm gonna.
But Pa said that.
But he did say that. But that.
And he meant it.
He did. But
if anything about Paul and Ma Kent, they were sincere. Salt of the earth.
In I think 6 months is enough time to
we'll come back and spoil it.
In 6 months, sure. I'm going to spoil it, and I'm going to tell you guys.
Don't worry, audience. We'll circle back on.
I'm gonna unleash on this movie, and I hate it so much, and
with great vengeance and furious anger.
Indeed.
Yeah. So just speaking of great fury and furious anger, great vengeance, the Epistle of Barnabas.
Yeah.
So when we got into this, I don't even remember how it came up. It came up as a sidebar conversation or something. And then we decided we needed to kind of do it as a standalone. Which if anybody in the chat, if any listeners remember, tell us how we even got here.
I kind of remember.
It was like the argument for literal versus allegorical
Well,
readings of Israel, right? So we were talking about Israel and whether or not, yeah.
right.
So
My contention is that a lot of the church's theology, especially as it relates to Israel and the question of whether they're still God's chosen people, replacement theology and how that applies to the end times. A lot of this came. My contention is that in the early church, this mutual hostility between Jews and Christians kind of drove the Gentile church away from, quite emphatically and intentionally, away from Jewish ways of thinking. Um, they were kind of actively rejecting anything that was that would any kind of Jewish identity to Christianity, and any kind of Jewish framework for understanding the Bible. And I think and that kind of led them to embrace more Greco-Roman, Neoplatonic, like Greek philosophy type ideas, which is where you get the substance dualism that we're always talking about, this idea of a strict distinction between spirit and body, which is where you get the ideas of going away to an afterlife as a disembodied spirit, which is not in the Bible. So I use the Epistle of Barnabas, and it's like is probably the most conspicuous example of this kind of not just a distinction between Judaism as it was, and Christian understanding of the Bible, but an utter rejection, and frankly an erroneous rejection of any kind of Jewish mode of thought. You kind of have like hints of that thinking in the church fathers and in like the Didache, which we've mentioned before, like the Didache, the teaching of the 12 apostles. It was a very early, probably the earliest Christian writing outside of the New Testament, maybe even predated some books of the New Testament. But there's that part where they're talking about fasting, and the specific instructions are the hypocrites fast on these 2 days of the week. So and we don't want to be like the hypocrites, so we're going to fast on these other 2 days of the week. Like there's nothing intrinsically wrong with
I think it
fasting on
says
those.
heathens, but yeah.
No, I think it says hypocrites.
well, depend. I mean, there's probably different translations
Could
depending
be.
on where you find it, right, or
Well, but it would be
what source you're reading.
I got it right in front of me. I'll bet
Because
you
there's
a bill.
interpolations. Oh, of course, you have the correct source, obviously, the best translation that's
Well,
in front of you.
I mean, yeah.
ITs. There's a great website, Early Christian Writings,
Yeah.
where you can find most of these, documents that we're talking about. And what's great about the website is it'll give you multiple translations
Mhm.
of these documents, and it's kind
Well,
of cool. It runs through a history of them, and
I don't know that the Didache has been translated that way. Brian, it's in chapter 8, and my version says hypocrites. But
I accept your apology.
I certainly didn't apologize. I'm just trying to move the show along.
You're right.
Yeah. But yeah, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong about fasting on those 2 days. It's just that that's when the Jews do it, and so we can't. And like that's an example of that kind of thinking. But the Epistle of Barnabas, it's probably the number one offender of that in terms of that way of thinking. And the Epistle of Barnabas, it was written in the late first century, early second century. It was not written by the actual Barnabas.
It's traditionally attributed to Barnabas.
Um,
Who is Barnabas, Brian?
Barnabas was a companion of Paul mentioned in
Right.
the book of Acts. But nobody thought that the epistle of, well, at least most people didn't think it was canonical, but it was still highly influential and revered. It was included in Codex Sinaiticus, which is the basis for pretty much all modern Bibles that aren't King James, um, which was dated to the fourth century. It was probably one of the Bibles commissioned by Emperor Constantine to go in the to be in the cathedral in Constantinople. just based on the quality of the paper, of the writing, the kind of script that was used. It was dated to that time, and it was such a lavish product that it was probably a lot of money went into it. So it was probably one of these 50 Bibles that Constantine commissioned. Um, but just the fact that the Epistle of Barnabas was included in that, and the fact that it's mentioned so frequently by the early church fathers, kind of speaks to how influential it was. And so if it was that influential, that anti-Jewish, it kind of explains a lot of the stuff that I would say we get wrong, even up to today. But
I mean, so that's an interesting. I don't know that I. So when the research I did on it was kind of I was trying to read about it versus reading it, to try to kind of get the high level view of what's in that specific piece of writing. And what I took from the reading was that it certainly was influential for the time. Specifically, that apparently there isn't anybody categorically or even individually that has ever come out and said, this is canonical, this is inspired writing, which is interesting, right? Because for it to be that um, well known, right, and to have gotten that much airtime, so to speak, but many people do speak to the polemic nature of the writing. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right? That it was heavily anti-Torah, anti-Jew.
well, it's not anti-Torah so much as,
It really is, though.
well, I would say it's pro-Torah, but its contention is that it isn't that it's not that it's anti-Torah. It's that the claim is that the Jews have never understood the
Right,
Torah
that's what I was gonna
correctly.
say. They
Okay.
they view the Torah through a different lens, um, and it's interesting writing just because it gives you a glimpse or an inside view of how different early Christians were. There's sects of people that believed different things,
Yeah.
and for it to be that widely circulated and to have that much trouble with the Judaism at the time, then it gives you an insight of what early Christianity was like and the battle for this true religion that survives
Yeah.
whatever version that we have of it today. Um,
It,
uh,
it's just real quick, Dre. The one thing, Brian, that you said that I don't know that from what I've researched doesn't seem to agree with what you said was you talked about the duality, and that's not the what I pulled from the
Well,
analyses.
let me clarify.
Okay.
I'm not arguing that the Epistle of Barnabas itself is particularly Gnostically inclined or even
Okay.
particularly influenced by paganism or Greco-Roman mythology or Greek philosophy. But the hostility toward Judaism and Jewish ways of thinking, Jewish identity, that kind that as an attitude pushed the church further into those other influences. Like if you don't have a Jewish paradigm, like you need some kind of interpretive grid by which to understand Jesus and his teachings. Judaism is that paradigm that by which the original church understood Jesus. In the Epistle of Barnabas, it's like the arguments, just to kind of clarify what I'm getting at. Um, like you find this idea in the Old Testament and that Paul repeats in Romans and elsewhere about how it isn't circumcision of the flesh that matters so much as circumcision of the heart. If you're circumcised in flesh but not in the heart, you're not a true you're only a Jew outwardly, which means you're not
Maybe
really a true
Barnabas
Jew
taught
at
him
all.
that. That's-
Um, well, except what the Epistle of Barnabas teach. So clearly, like if you read the book of Genesis, Abraham was literally circumcised. He circumcised Ishmael and Isaac and all of the men in his household. Um, there in the book of Exodus, there's an episode where when Moses is on his way from Midian to Egypt to rescue the Israelites, it says the angel of the Lord tried to kill him until his wife Zipporah went and circumcised their sons and laid the foreskins at Moses' feet. It's a very shocking episode. But there's nothing. But basically, the point of that was that Moses fleeing from Egypt and living in Midian, he was kind of renouncing his identity as an Israelite. He just wasn't planning to be an Israelite. So he had two sons and he didn't bother circumcising them because he considered himself in exile from his people. Then the God of his ancestors appear to him, sends him to rescue his people. He should have circumcised his sons in light of that. He should have circumcised them when they were 8 days old, as the covenant of Abraham said. But the fact that he didn't recognize this error on his part and take up his Israelite identity by putting the sign of the covenant on his sons, this is what angered the Lord and why he almost killed him. But there's no indication that this was symbolic, that the circumcision was of the heart and not of the flesh.
Right.
Clearly, being circumcised, the physical sign is supposed to point you toward the internal sign. It's a reminder to be circumcised in heart. The argument of the book of the Epistle of Barnabas is that it was never supposed to be literal, that the Jews were wrong all along to have been literally circumcising their children in keeping with the covenant, and that all of these things that they were doing literally they were always symbolic and never should have been literal at all, which is a very different thing than what Paul taught. And he kind of gets as there's all kinds of other things where he kind of does this eisegesis. He projects this meaning onto these things as supposed symbols, to kind of make this point, which is
right.
And at some point, I'm going to read the examples of the dietary laws because they're so absurd that
they're pretty good. I don't know. What I took away from the text, I read it a few times, kind of in close proximity of my reading. So I read it once, and then a couple days I read it again because it's not very long. But what I took away from it is that the purpose of the text itself was to kind of bridge the interpretive divide between Jewish traditions and Christian theology. So Old Covenant versus New Covenant. Some of the major themes that I noticed was the rejection of the literal meaning of the Hebrew scriptures, with the emphasis on spiritual interpretations, which is why we got into Epistle of Barnabas in the first place, just spiritual interpretations. We were talking a few weeks ago.
Okay.
There's a strong promotion of like moral purity that kind of goes throughout, and then of like most of the kingdom at hand apocalyptic literature, there's an urgency in preparation.
I saw a lot of that.
The coming of the kingdom of God, and the theological focus is basically spiritual versus literal, allegorical approach to scripture, and it highlights all the spiritual meaning behind the Mosaic law, which is kind of interesting that you say that it kind of craps on Mosaic law. When I took it, I don't know. I think one of the things that used to annoy me when I was a child, I would get like a sermon or some preacher would talk and he would take a chunk of whatever scripture was assigned that week and then just talk about what it means ad nauseum. like I guess it could mean that. I mean, I suppose it could mean that. If you want it to mean that, I think you can point to something like that. And it seems to me that these early Christians were so Christ and cross centered that they found the cross in every single verse in the Old Testament. As they're reading along, like that points to Jesus. Know what that means? That's the cross. And I'm sure Brian will read some of the passages like, that means the cross. And then it literally reads like that. Oh, this thing over here, and that means Jesus. And that means Jesus. Oh yeah, that means Jesus. So all you Jews were wrong about what that means
Right. That,
because of Jesus.
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and
Well,
Michael Heiser. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say it's interesting that, on one hand that you're pointing out, and you're right, that, the Epistle of Barnabas is a little over interested in being interpretive and symbolic versus being literal, right? But it's some of the highest levels of Christology of any non-canonical writing,
Yeah.
right? So,
Agree.
so the document's not completely bad in that it's pointing to an ultra high Christology, to the point that Dre was just making.
Well, what do you mean by an ultra high Christology?
I don't know how to say that in simpler words. Like, it's very specific that Christ is pre-existent. He was crucified. He's central to all prophecy. He's the Son of God. He's part of the
Okay.
triune Godhead. Like, the ideas of everything that Christians think of Christ, the Apostle of Barnabas is like more. Right, like
Yeah.
to Dre's point, everything is like, it's the opposite of the church lady from SNL, right? Could it be Satan? Like,
Could it
Epistle
be
of Barnabas
Jesus?
is like everything is, and this
Yes.
is Jesus,
Yeah.
and this is Jesus, and that's Jesus, and it's like, I don't think that's Jesus. I mean, it's cool. I love me some Jesus, but like, that was just like, you know,
It feels like a new convert wrote the epistle.
right?
Yeah, he's doing something that Dr. Michael Heiser would often criticize about Christians, where we sort of Christians have a bad habit of kind of reading their creeds backwards into the text.
Sure.
And like, it's not that the creed isn't correct, and it's not that the Old Testament doesn't prefigure Christ. It's not that there isn't all this symbolism and typology that points to Christ, but you have to kind of, you can't start with that and then kind of retroject it onto the text. You have to read the text on its own terms, and then you understand what the text is saying, so that when Jesus shows up, then you understand how he fulfills all of these types. It's like he started with the creed and then just didn't bother ever consulting any Jewish commentary or any of the stuff that the apostles themselves understood and validated in their reading of the Old Testament. Like there's all kinds of beliefs that come out of the Old Testament that are not obvious to us, that they took for granted, that we find represented in Jewish literature of the time. Like there's in the Epistle of the Hebrews, for instance, there's this part where he talks about how the Old Covenant was mediated by angels, like angels plural, where that's not at all apparent as we just read the Torah, because it's just God and Moses there. There's later stuff in the Psalms that kind of talk about how there were tens of thousands and thousands of thousands of his holy ones there that were with him on the procession from Mount Sinai to Mount Zion, and but it's not necessarily apparent in the text, but you do get that from a lot of Second Temple period Jewish literature, which the apostles. So basically, the apostles validated the overall Jewish understanding of the Old Testament at the time. It's just that they rejected Jesus as a person, because he undermined their institutional commitments and their sense of identity as God's exclusive chosen people. But yeah, and it's just to kind of sum that up. Yeah, they were reading the Epistle of Barnabas. The writer of the epistle was reading his creed into the text without actually studying the text to understand how it supports the creed. But
So it's like it's in the genre of what they call it, typology prophecy. So the Epistle of Barnabas talks a lot about, I mean, it references Deuteronomy and Isaiah a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find, first century Christianity in Isaiah, then it's gotta mean that. And and there's a little bit of Daniel in there, but a lot of Moses and a lot of Isaiah. That like that's Jesus. Hello. What are you talking? What are you talking about? It's Jesus now. So you're done. There's a new covenant. There's a new sheriff in town,
Right.
and
Yeah.
his name is
No,
Christianity.
and it certainly had all of that, covenant theology and what's that other I guess replacement theology or replacement whatever. I think they call the article I was reading called it supersessionism, which I'd never heard that word before, but that
Oh yeah,
apparently
where it
means the same
supersedes.
thing. Yeah,
So the New Testament supersedes the Old Testament.
exactly.
Period.
Yeah.
And stop.
Well, specifically, the church replaces Israel.
Right.
That's what
Well,
they were putting to that. So I mean, and it's funny because like I've got this one page up and it's got like 10 topic items, right? But 7 of the 10 are the same thing. Just it's circumcision wasn't real, but then it also says the Old Testament was allegorical. Well, the circumcision not being real is covered by the
Right.
allegorical reading of the Old Testament. It's just a thing that they pulled out as a hyper specific issue.
Burnt offerings is another thing.
Yeah.
Along with circumcision.
I saw that. So who else agrees that the Epistle of Barnabas is not to be taken as inspired writing? Bart Ehrman.
You
Well,
don't say.
But he doesn't believe in inspired writing anyway, so that doesn't.
But he doesn't. But he says, and if I did, this would not fit that category.
Yeah. I want to clarify that, like, and this is what's tricky about the Epistle of Barnabas. When you sum it up in the abstract, it sounds valid. Supersessionism, the idea that the new covenant supersedes the old covenant, that's biblical. That's true. That's the whole point of the Epistle of the Hebrews, which is that this is the old covenant through Moses is obsolete because the new covenant fulfills it, so it supersedes it. That's 100% valid. But that's not the point that the Epistle of Barnabas is making. He's not saying the new covenant supersedes the old. He's saying the old covenant, it's never been in effect in the sense that Jews observed it. Like, they were never supposed to be doing literal circumcision or offering literal sacrifices. Like, there's all kinds and he quotes all kinds of scriptures from the Old Testament out of context, like in Isaiah, where God is rebuking them for their offerings, telling them that he's fed up with their offerings. He doesn't want them. The point isn't that sacrifices and offerings in the temple in and of themselves are bad. It's that they were being offered without the right heart behind them. Like, they weren't being offered faithfully. They were being offered ritualistically and transactionally. I think it's in Jeremiah chapter 6, maybe 7, where Jeremiah stands at the gate of the temple and he tells them, you are trusting in deceptive words to no avail. Where you come here and stand before me in this place that's called by my name, saying the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, but then go on doing all of these abominations and worshiping false gods and committing adultery and murder and theft and all this stuff. Like, the point is, for the sacrifices to mean anything, for circumcision of the flesh to mean anything, they have to be circumcised in heart. They have to be offered in faithful devotion and love to the Lord, not as they can't be offered as a replacement for being faithful and obedient. They're offered as an expression of faithfulness and obedience. But the Epistle of Barnabas is treating it as if sacrifice itself was abolished by Isaiah's statement, which misses the whole point.
So I mean, you just said kind of a lot there, and I'm not rebutting you per se,
Okay.
or that you have the interpolation wrong, but that is an interpolation, right? So what you're saying is interpreting the text that we're talking about right now, and here we are, 2,500 years removed from that particular text. These guys are 500 years removed and living in a Jewish community. do you think they would know that? Like, why would you
Well,
know better than the author of the Epistle of Barnabas? So in my mind, I don't. It almost seems to me as if they're addressing an audience where, I mean, the questions came up to Paul all the time, like, do we have to become Jewish in order to become Christian? And the answer was no, right? But is Barnabas talking? I mean, I'm saying Barnabas for
Clarity
pseudo
we're on the
Barnabas.
same page,
simplicity.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is he just talking to an audience, and this is his way of saying no, you don't have to, and here's some kind of allegorical reason why this still attaches, and him doing that without actually shitting on Jews? I mean, we're saying, but it doesn't actually say Jews are wrong inside the Epistle of Barnabas. It's just given, and it just interpolates what was said by these prophets.
Let me read you something, because it's not my interpretation. This is what it said. I'm looking for the part on circumcision because that's pretty. I wrote up this handy note card and I'm ignoring it.
Is that like chapter 8 through 11, somewhere in that ballpark? I seem to remember.
It's in the middle.
Yeah.
This is very annoying. I know. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. In chapter 9, which is
close.
which is what I had right up in front of me. But um, but the circumcision in which they have trusted has been abolished, for he declared that circumcision was not a matter of the flesh, but they disobeyed because an evil angel enlightened them. He says to them, "This is what the Lord your God says. Here I find a commandment. Do not sow among thorns. Be circumcised to your Lord." And what does he say? Circumcise your hard-heartedness and stop being stiff-necked. Take this again. Behold, says the Lord, all the nations have become uncircumcised, have uncircumcised foreskins, but this people has an uncircumcised heart. So he's saying that physical circumcision was abolished at the word of the prophets that condemned them for being uncircumcised in heart. Like from that moment that Jeremiah condemned being circumcised only in the flesh, what this is saying is that they were supposed to stop being circumcised physically and be circumcised in heart. Like he's kind of setting these things in opposition to each other when in reality the one builds on the other. And the now the food laws, like this is where my point really kind of comes out. Now, when Moses said, "You shall not eat a pig or an eagle or a hawk or a crow or any fish that has no scales," he received, according to the correct understanding, three precepts. Furthermore, he says to them in Deuteronomy, "I was set forth as a covenant to this people my righteous requirements. Therefore, it is not God's commandment that they should not eat. Rather, Moses spoke spiritually, like they were never supposed to be keeping the literal dietary laws." So accordingly, he mentioned the pig for this reason. You must not associate, he means, with such people who are like pigs. That is, when they are well off, they forget the Lord, but when they are in need, they acknowledge the Lord, just as the pig ignores its owner when it is feeding, but when it is hungry, it starts to squeal and falls silent only after being fed again. Now, as I'm reading this, I got to wonder, how does a people who don't raise pigs as livestock, how do they know how a pig acts? Much less, how do they know that this is supposed to apply to people who act this way, that only people who raise pigs would know pigs
I mean,
act?
it's not like, I don't think there were many humans at that time in the region that were that far removed from farm life that they weren't aware of how those animals acted. It's not like us today that, people could go their whole life and never see a pig in the wild.
Well, if you live in a country where eating pigs is illegal, you can be stoned to death for doing that. You're not going to have a lot of pigs
That's
around.
fair. No, that's a fair point. Pig specifically. Okay, you're right. Yeah, that's a fair point.
It just seems to me a lot of what's interpreted by this author, by Barnabas, is so convenient.
Well,
it's like reading backwards into
yeah.
Everything. It's like they know the answer, so then they go find the questions in the Old Testament because
exactly.
they've already lived through the Jesus experience. So like, well, obviously the Savior saved us from all this nonsense that we did back then. And it's
So
just all
let me read another couple
go ahead.
examples to drive this home, because this is some pretty wacky stuff. Furthermore, you shall not eat the hare. Why? Do not become, he means, one who corrupts children or even resembles such people, because the hare grows another opening every year, and thus
Hare,
has it
Hare.
like a
Hare.
bunny wabbit.
Yeah, I was just clarifying for the listeners because if you haven't read this, I read it and saw that it said hair and remember that, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean Hair hair.
And so, and this is all because a hare grows another opening every year, and thus has as many orifices as it is years old. Again, neither shall you eat the hyena. Do not become, he means, an adulterer or a seducer, or even resemble such people. Why? Because this animal changes its nature from year to year and becomes male one time and female another.
They're making the
Um,
frogs gay.
yeah, but it like
the
but
hyena, actually that was thought about hyenas until like fairly recently, like hundreds of years.
Really?
Yeah, I think it got debunked by some scientists like in
Hmm.
the 1800s or something, which is
um
wild.
yeah,
So if you
but
understand science to be that way, and we had that whole, thing we talked about Paul and sexual because of the angels, right? And hair, Hair. Um,
I see what you did there.
so if their point was to make the point about the hyena, which they believed scientifically the hyena did, then that would be a pretty filthy animal to be consuming, right?
well, but his point is that the prohibition was never against eating hyenas. That wasn't literal. The prohibition was against associating with people who are hyena-like because they changed their nature.
Because
Um,
everything's a
what,
metaphor.
Well,
The
yeah, and I
whole
think
the whole Old Testament's a metaphor,
and
big
that's
fat metaphor.
so that I mean that it kind of begs the question: was he writing whoever Barnabas,
Sure.
fake Barnabas, whoever he was, and whatever he was writing, was he attempting to be literal with everything he wrote here, or was he writing this with the intention of it being a polemic, and as such it was it was type, it was he was trying to make a point. His point was clearly made, whether literal or not, right? Like his point was clearly, we don't like the Jews, right? Don't
Like
be like the
like
Jews.
like it's
Don't.
okay to be under this new covenant. We don't have to be strict like they were under the old covenant.
Right.
If
And
that's
so,
the
I mean,
point.
yeah, that's, I mean, that's a genuine question. And I'm not trying to justify like accepting this document as, as sacred manuscript. I'm just curious from a no shit, what was the guy trying to get across? Did he intend this to be read biblically like a Bible, or was he just like writing a dissertation and he was like, oh yeah, this is what I think of
well,
them, and you know what I
like
mean. He
what
was
do you
being
mean? Was
so
he?
purposely flamboyant and over the top that he knew his point was going to land regardless, but he didn't expect the reader to consider his words to be literally accurate word for word.
And he didn't expect us
It's a
three
question.
yahoos 3,000 years later to be,
To
be
even
Well,
still be
questioning.
reading his book,
and
let alone,
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
and to your question before, Dre, about how to like, how do I know better than what he knew? Um, well, one, I can just read the Old Testament and see that like he's wrong. Like I don't have to.
My point was to Matt's point. He knows he's literally wrong, right?
I'm not sure he does know that though. I'm
I
not.
mean, I'm not sure that he doesn't, right? Because I think he's making a point, and I think if you're making a point, you don't have to be, fully correct while you're making that point. You have to be correct in ideology, not in literal terms.
And we could still trash the theology, right? We could still say that he's not right because, the Old
Well,
Testament was being interpreted properly. So,
uh,
even if you did get, I mean, because he was saying that regardless of what he said,
the
right?
thing is, we actually are in a much better position to know the what the Old Testament meant and to know that context. Like if you stop and kind of think about it, the early church fathers didn't know what a ziggurat was. They didn't have any by that time. They were in ruins. They weren't going to Mesopotamia, to see the ziggurats. They didn't like that kind of that practice of worship wasn't that had been gone for centuries. So when they're reading the Tower of Babel story, like they don't have the understanding that we have, but with the benefit of the past 150 years of archaeology and textual discoveries. So we actually are in a far better position to understand the Old Testament than they were. And I don't know that they like most most people didn't have their own copy of the entire Bible. Like we have no idea who wrote the Epistle of Barnabas, but I think it's safe to say that he didn't have a deep understanding of the Hebrew Scriptures, um, just based on how I mean, that to even be able to claim that circumcision wasn't supposed to be literal, or that the temple system wasn't supposed to be literal, he clearly didn't have a firm grasp of these things. And I think he's an example of of a Gentile coming in from a very Gentile perspective, kind of having an outsider's perspective on Jewish culture, but he's been given the creeds and he's been taught that Christians and not Jews are the chosen people, and the Christian way of reading the Old Testament is symbolic and allegorical as pointing to Christ, and so he's reading that into it backwards. Um,
I'm going to disagree with you and say I find it laughable to think that the writer of Barnabas didn't have a deep understanding of the Old Testament because he quoted the shit out of it. He had to have had access to all of the books, and we all know that just having access to these books was not a small feat. It wasn't like having a pocket Bible that he could walk around with. So this guy had spent a bunch of time either reading the Torah or had read notes on the Torah. Either way is considerable knowledge of it. None of that, by the way, before you cut me off, is to say that he was correct. But to say that he didn't have an understanding of the Old Testament, he has a better understanding of the Old Testament than most human beings walking the planet Earth.
I think
Like,
he didn't care. I think it didn't matter if he had an
right.
understanding of it because he had a point to make, and
He had an axe to grind.
superseded that old
Yeah.
covenant anyway.
Right.
So, and by pointing to it's kind of like when you go to like a right wing pundit, and every single point that they make, Dan Bongino does this a lot. And so does Steven Crowder. Only use lefty sources to prove your point, right? Never, so no one can ever give you a credibility check, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I say that
Dan Bongino used to do this,
yeah, he's down that middle, and Epstein killed himself. Anyway, that if MSNBC says it or ABC News says it, and you can't even flex on it, then you can't argue because your own sources that say it. And I think that Barnabas was taking Jewish text and saying, hey, look, I'm using your text to show you that Jesus is our Lord and Savior, and why are you messing with that old covenant when we're under a new covenant, and I am the chosen people, not longer you, Israel.
Right. And all of that to say, I don't agree with many or all of his points, right? But Brian, I'm just pushing back on the one thing to say that he didn't know the Bible, because I mean he quotes it through and through and through, right? He footnotes his whole thing.
He quotes it out of context and highly and selectively, and we don't even know that he's the one making the selection. I mean, remember, they were an oral dominant culture then, so a lot of their scriptural knowledge, and I'm not saying this is universally true, but as a lay person, most of it was memorized. They got it orally and they memorized it, and so we don't. Maybe this guy like had full copies in front of him. My point doesn't really hinge on it either way.
Sure.
But even if he had a full copy of it in front of him, he's one, this isn't me speculating. He's telling us right now that he rejects the Jewish way of
Mhm.
understanding it.
Agreed.
He clearly doesn't have the understanding of the Old Testament scriptures that a Jewish Christian, as an insider to Jewish culture, would have had.
That I agree.
He's
Or
coming.
what if he's taken out of context on purpose, though?
Well,
Why to just to just to
To
have
win the
fun.
argument. How many people will
sure.
know some right and just take a quote from somebody and
Oh.
just use it in that manner, whether they know or understand or not? And oftentimes they actually do understand the real context.
This is
but
written.
it doesn't help their argument. But
This
if it's
is
written
written
as a polemic, then
Yeah,
they're
this
gonna
is like
take
if
shit out
Bart
of context.
if Bart Ehrman wanted to write a document to like prove that the Bible was fake, he would do something like this, where he would just quote the hell out of it and use it against
And
himself.
he
Right,
has.
right. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
well, I don't. No, I think he
I don't think we
believes what
are.
he was.
I think
I
Brian's
don't.
saying something completely different.
Yeah, I don't think like I don't Dre. I don't understand what you're proposing other than that he was arguing dishonestly.
I'm saying that that's a possibility. I'm not saying that he is arguing dishonestly, but he might be.
I mean, I suppose anything's possible.
I don't think there's evidence saying that he's not any more than he is.
Being dishonest, you mean?
Correct. Yeah.
So
Well-
he could have been having a very honest take, albeit flawed, right? But it was what he believed to be accurate based on his interpretations of what he read and knew.
And selectively taking passages.
Sure.
Yeah, I think unless there's reason to think he's deliberately arguing in bad faith, I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt that he believes what he's saying, but he's hilariously wrong because he doesn't understand the scriptures.
And I think that's where we depart. Like, because I think he does understand, which is why he's using them.
I don't think he's hilariously wrong. I think he's only a little bit wrong.
I think he's wildly wrong. I don't understand how that could be a little bit wrong.
Because the difference is that you can be partially correct on an interpretation of a section in the Bible, but then if you build an entire theology off of being off center by a degree, by the time you're done, you're very far off.
Because you only degree off, but once you go 10,000 miles,
right. So
ask any lieutenant with a compass.
I was actually thinking about land nav when I said that, right? That if you set off on a course and you're off by a half a degree, you travel for a month, you're way off target, right? So like on this list of all of the main themes, right? Supersessionism, allegorical interpretation, Jewish law critique, two ways theology is what they call this, Brian. You started to call it dualism. And
those are different things.
Oh yeah, so this doesn't bring up
it's very Dead Sea Scroll and
I didn't pick up any dualism in anything but this two-way theology is just like, we have two natures inside of us, and I think that's
that's
pretty.
And you find that in the Didache also. That's
right.
a
common. The Didache opens with that.
Right, yeah. And then high Christology, right? So broken clocks right twice a day, right?
But again, that's what I meant when I said, like, in the abstract. Like if you describe it just in kind of very broad terms, yeah, it sounds legit.
No, again, I'm not saying it's legit. I'm saying that I don't think it's off by the hilarious levels that you think it's off by. Now, when it's all said and done and you net it all together, I do think it's way off, right? Because I think all of those small wrong think points, you start becoming multiplicative of those small mistakes or small misreads or small misinterpretations, you end up with a massive problem, right? So at the end, I think it's hugely off. I don't think the individual mistakes are that big. They're there, right? I'm not suggesting that they're all right and there's only like one thing he's wrong about. I think, again, he's broadly wrong about one thing, that the Old Testament wasn't meant to be taken literally, right? But is he right in some places? Yeah, sure. We've talked about the fact that there's some parts of the Old Testament that are meant to be allegorical, right? The problem
Well,
is that when you decide none of it's real, then it becomes problematic.
right. And the main issue is that reading it the way that that pseudo Barnabas tells us to, that actually blinds you to the ways that the Old Testament actually is about Christ. Like if you're starting with your creed and
Right.
deciding that the Jews have always been wrong to read it literally, and that the right way to read it is to read it symbolically to the exclusion of the literal.
Right.
That's just not what that's just not what it is.
Then it's
And
not
you're
even about
gonna,
Jesus anymore.
If
It's just a bunch of
everything
stories.
is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Right. If everything's an allegory, then there's no Christianity, right? There's no God.
right.
I mean,
But
was Jesus even born?
Right.
It's an allegory.
Right.
and then
Yeah.
and then the church taking that to heart, they obviously afforded this document a lot of credibility because it was included in Codex Sinaiticus. It was included in the Bible, even if it wasn't canonical. It still came with some authority.
Mhm.
Um,
It was an insert with the Bible. You got the Bible, and you're like, oh, by the way, here's an extra
Right.
thing, extra reading, and you're like,
which is what a lot of Christians do today. Like if you're reading
I
the
was gonna say,
Bible through the lens of Calvin, or through the lens of any given Vatican Council, or papal decree, you're starting with your decree, with your creeds
Right.
and your dogmas, and reading that backwards into it instead of getting it from the text itself. You're doing eisegesis, not exegesis.
or if you're only listening to whatever megachurch pastor is on the airwaves, there's tons of sermons that they sound legit until like you get the totality of the entire sermon. You're like,
yeah.
what?
Or if you're only listening to like idiot podcasters that are telling you what you should believe in the Bible.
Right. Which that's way more right than the megachurch. You should listen to these three morons.
But and that's really my main point, is just how this way of thinking, how it kind of characterized the early church, and that kind of sent the trajectory of theology off in a certain direction, where we kind of, that's why we needed a restoration movement 500 years ago, and why we kind of still need a restoration movement. We're still carrying around a lot of that baggage from the anti-Jewish way of interpreting it. So,
But I do dig the insight that because we could see that early on that it was off by a degree, that later on, as you say, that we needed a restoration. It kind of tells you how that happened and where it happened, and that the communities even early had it wrong. And it's easy to stay wrong for centuries in a row, which don't take my word for it, right? Go read the Epistle of Barnabas yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy gives references. He brings his receipts.
Well, that's what I was saying. He read it's footnoted like a
right.
I mean, if you read this and it was a modern document, this would read like a college paper,
Right.
with
So,
as much
I mean,
footnoting as he does.
but then when you go back and read those verses he cites in context, you're like, well, how the hell did he get that?
Which is why I would encourage you to do it. Go
Yeah.
look up Isaiah, go look up a Deuteronomy,
Yeah.
and these references that Barnabas is putting down.
Not for nothing. If you were to go back and read any of my college papers, it would be just like this. I'm just saying. My footnotes were solid.
And then when
Did the paper really say what I said it said?
and then when the professor argues with you, you're like, whoa, I annotated it.
The good news is I wrote so convincingly, my professors never actually critiqued my footnotes, my citations. I learned in my final year, kids don't do this. I learned in my final year that I could get away with reading the abstract of a paper, and I could invent things that they were saying, because then I would go through the actual article and I would find excerpts, just like what Barnabas did, by the way. And I'm like, psh, that's clearly what this is talking about here. And I'd just be like, according to so and so and so and so et alia, blah 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 blah. And then
So Brian, now you know why Matt's making these arguments, because he identifies with
I am
Barnabas.
Barnabas.
Yeah, I am Spartacus. I am Barnabas.
I had this poli-sci professor who would for the test he would just pass out, like, give us like 4 blank sheets of paper, and he would write essay questions on the chalkboard.
Mhm.
And I soon began to suspect that he was not reading the test at all. He was just checking to see if you wrote anything at all.
If you could make a
And he-
cogent point that,
Not even that. Not even that. I promise it's not even that.
yeah.
Just if you wrote anything at all, he gave you full credit. So because I tested this on the final, and I already had it, like my grades were such that I was already guaranteed an A no matter what I did on the final. So one of the questions was like to explain, like, what was the Philadelphia plan, or whatever, all the various constitution plans for the Constitution. And I answered that let's say it was the question was the Philadelphia plan. According to this plan, wealthy white landowners got to be king on their birthday. And if you had more than one wealthy white landowner with a birthday on a given day, they had to arm wrestle for it.
That's pretty bad.
And that got full credit.
I think he read that and said,
I'll allow it.
You know what? He already has an A, so I don't want to burst his bubble.
And then the next one was, who is
I'll buy him a
this
Klan hat. So,
who was this particular, founding father? I put that I think he was the lead singer of the Bee Gees, but I was
Barry Gibb?
I was born in the 70s, so I don't quite remember. He might have been the drummer for Pink Floyd. Full credit. Full credit.
he probably saluted you. He's like, you know what? That's cute.
No, this guy didn't have a sense of humor.
Oh, well, my poli-sci teacher just looked at me and said, that's an interesting take, but you accomplished the assignment and noted it.
Yeah.
So
I in my
A
last
for you. You
in
definitely have your own style, Mr. Bibbs.
that's that's a good thing.
Right? So,
I successfully in my last paper cited the Bible, which is hard to do in APA format, and I had like a nervous breakdown trying to make sure I cited it properly, because it's like really hard to do. Once you understand it, obviously it works, but it's not like citing a regular book. And I also figured out how to cite Ricky Bobby, because I in my paper I said, to quote the famous Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. And then I was like, do I have to cite that? And I was like, shit, I think I do. So then I spent like 4 hours reading how to cite a movie. And it's weird because you have to, the
What
references.
was this class?
and now you have like crazy skills now, man. Like, now you like, I could bullshit my way through anything like right
Yeah.
now.
I don't remember what the class was, but I cited Ricky Bobby.
Hmm.
But when you write the citation for a movie, you have to cite like the executive producer and the writer and the director and the film house, and like, so it was like, I have like this big long, the citation was as long as my damn paper was by the time I was done, because it was so complicated. And I swear, I think that my professor was like, and then he looked at my footnote and went, I'll be damned, he figured out how to cite that properly. He's like, who am I to get in the way of this guy graduating? But I have a degree on the wall, so like, suck it.
You sound like my son.
Shake and bake, man.
Yeah.
Shake and bake.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Brian. Dre's right. That's kind of why I'm not defending this, but I'm trying to like put myself in the position of the person writing it, because I feel like this is something I would have done if I was around during the church fathers' time, and I was.
And I don't think it makes you dishonest
and I had a point
either
to make
at the same time.
Well, it makes me not an inspired prophet or apostle for sure, right?
Yeah. And I think reading the Epistle of Barnabas, to Brian's point, why would they think that was ever inspired and have an argument for it to be in canon at all?
Right.
I think the fact that they even had that topic on the table for that epistle to be part of canon proves everything Brian said is right.
I learned a new word while reading
Wait,
about.
hold on. Can you?
No, I don't remember what I
I
said.
don't think
have no idea
I don't
where
think
was
I
going.
heard you. Can
I
you
don't think
say
I
that
knew where I
again?
was going with that.
I think the recording failed also.
Of course it would.
I learned a new word while I was reading about Barnabas. Her, I don't know what the correct pronunciation is. Heresiology, heresiology, heresiology.
Heresiology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the logia of heresis. So yeah, the study of heresies. I'm like,
I want
I
to be a
want
heresiologist.
I want to get a degree in this.
That's like the ultimate wizard dueling right there.
Yeah.
I
Like
think
that would be worth like taking a sabbatical and going to some like Bible college and
Dude,
being
I
like,
might-
I want a freaking master's in heresiology.
I think I'm close to an AA in heresies. I think I am. So this would be an easy course.
Dre just has to give our podcast for his life studies, and they're going to be like, "Damn, son, you got a lot of heresy in there."
I know my heresies. Don't get it twisted.
Right.
Brian does not find that amusing at all. That's kind of funny. When we start talking heresies, Brian's like, "Whoa,
He gets all uncomfortable.
I don't think so, Satan. Not today. Not today."
I just don't want to be seen like tacitly endorsing a heresy by like y'all say something heretical. If I just let it slide, it's like I agree with you.
No, you just what you could. You know what you could do, Brian? I'll add a footnote.
What can I do?
I will add a footnote to our show description that Brian gives no endorsement of anything Matt or Dre ever say on this show.
Unless he expressly
Right. Unless expressly given, there is no endorsement implied.
That wouldn't be a bad idea, actually.
I can add, if you want to write it up, I'll add it to our footnotes.
Or
I'm
I
not
can-
kidding. I'm being dead ass.
Or I can just like say I disavow when you guys say
Well,
stuff.
I mean, you need a soundboard then.
So it's happening in real time.
So you
You
just
do
hit a
need a
button.
sound-
Disavow.
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 Heretic.
But I don't want to
Shame.
just say you guys are wrong. I want to explain why you're wrong.
Yeah, but sometimes we're only being wrong for amusement purposes. Sometimes the heresy is just for giggles.
Nothing funny
Right.
about heresy.
I disagree.
I disagree too.
There's
I
a
think-
lot funny with heresy.
All right, what's the funniest heresy? I'll tell you why it's tragic.
I
and
can't
mean.
even do that.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
mean-
need it. That's a show.
That is heresies.
I don't want to do a show about the funniest heresies.
That's the day Brian's out. We're just
Brian's gonna have to fake an injury. Dre and I
we're
are
just
gonna be
gonna
like,
talk heresies
all right, everybody, settle
for
in.
2 hours. Coming up on Mount Hermeneutic, heresies.
We
Enough
love them.
said.
Actually, it would be a good show. I can already see the clip art would have to be some Warhammer shit. You know.
Speaking of heresies,
Type shit.
maybe this is a tease for next week. Maybe it's just a tease for a show down the
Oh,
line.
I see where
Lay
you're
it
going
on
with
us.
this.
We talked about this earlier today.
Right.
Islam.
The
It just
ultimate
keep-
heresy.
It just keeps coming, and why don't we stop it?
Spicy.
Why don't we
Spicy
stop it?
Let's do it.
heresies.
So
I mean,
we're gonna have fatwas issued against us.
I'll just counter issue fatwas. What do I care?
okay.
Okay. I mean, cool. Yeah. Well,
I think some of our audience, just for clicking on it, is gonna all of a sudden lose their Christian card, or they're gonna get
yeah.
canceled.
Also,
Like-
and I think we should have a listener contest. Like they should send us in.
Heresies?
No, kinda from a. They should send us in their best drawings of Muhammad, and we can rate them on the
Disavow.
show.
Disavow. send
This
send
guy.
those to Brian. I'm gonna put Brian's mailing address in the show notes.
We just dox Brian.
Let me get a PO box. I don't want to make it that easy for the jihadists. I want like I'm happy to have them. I want them to work for it. I don't want to.
You want that smoke, but you don't want it like on your front door.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Bundy, I know you're drawing one right now.
That's good.
His wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm a fan of the show.
What's a cartoon of Muhammad? What's wrong with that?
I don't know. Ask Charlie Hebdo.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about that is there's I forget where it is. There's a verse in the Old Testament that says we're not supposed to make drawings of anything in heaven.
Well, we're not supposed to make idols to worship and bow down. Not in
I thought it said drawings. Is it only
No,
idols?
it says you are not to make an image or in anything in heaven above or in the earth beneath or the waters below to worship it or bow down to it. For the Lord your God is a jealous God.
Mm.
It doesn't there.
Oh, okay.
I mean
The context matters there.
the temple is full of images of um the cherubim and seraphim, and
Right.
I mean
So
there
is the
Nobody's
modern
bowing,
church, just
nobody's bowing down to him, right?
yeah,
just the
that exactly.
crucifix with Jesus all
But
bloody
that's
on it. To me is
but that's God on it though.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like having
I'm
like
not either.
big crucifixes in churches. Um, it always, well, that's another episode, um, but I do think that's an example of
Heresy.
how Gentile thinking, like there's that early rejection of Jewish ways of thinking kind of left them open to a lot of these things where like they don't have those like deeply ingrained sensibilities that like Jewish insiders would have against images and statues and to represent, icons and all that stuff.
So
But
would you say that our modern day secular influence does that on the modern church, where we bring these secular ideas to church pulpits and
oh,
have
absolutely,
these
yeah.
so-called pastors and or so-called view on, morality and marriage and the like?
Well, it's yes and no. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think it's worth noting that like our culture is kind of built on Judeo-Christian culture. I mean, of course, it's built on it in a way that went highly askew in the early centuries, so that we do have all of these pagan ideas, but it's not exactly the same as Gentiles in the first century coming in with virtually no understanding of Jewish thinking and then kind of reading those ideas into it. We're kind of further downstream, and we've kind of got, a mix of both. But there's absolutely no question that we do have those secular influences in churches. It's just a question of degree in any given church. Um, like I'm not even, there's obviously the so-called progressive churches where, Jesus would have been an abortion doula and supports gay marriage and drag shows in the pulpit. Um, but I also think in so-called conservative churches, you have a lot of those. They had that Supreme Court decision that came down that said that churches can endorse political candidates. Um, you guys heard about that recently?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
I'll send you a link later on, but I saw that story came through my Facebook feed, and just so many people were commenting, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to preach the gospel, um, which to me is insane. Um, Not that churches should necessarily campaign for any given candidate, but the idea that like a religion is this kind of siloed off interest that doesn't that shouldn't be integrated into politics and social views and economics and every other facet of life, that's a totally secular idea. If you're if the gospel doesn't inform your politics and your social views and your understanding of how to vote and for whom to vote, well, that just means you haven't integrated it into your worldview and your overall philosophy of life.
But that's a different place to be at versus saying, I want my pastor to tell me who to vote for.
Well, these were like pastors who were commenting.
No, but I'm saying I don't want my pastor to tell me who to vote for, because now I'm having to trust his read of the complexity of the political landscape and tell me it's one thing to say, hey, for the president, we're down to these two people. I think I'm team blue or I'm team red. But like in the primary, that's
Well,
you know what I mean? Like if you've got 3 or
yeah, but
4 candidates that are broadly Christian.
yeah, but that assumes that he's just going to be like telling you what to think anyway. I think a church that is functional and is educating its people instead of just indoctrinating them, he's not going to tell you, hey, vote for so and so or you're going to hell. I think that the values and outlook that's being taught there will kind of automatically lend themselves to people knowing for whom to vote. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that. I think it's easier to know who not to vote for based on, behavior and that. It's like, ooh, that guy, did y'all hear what he said? It's easier to know who not to go for versus like we're gonna stick signs in the front of the church's yard for, this candidate kind of thing. I don't know.
this might be a show.
I think we've done it before. I think we got into this, but we could get into it again. I mean, I think
I think we did it around your kitchen table with
might
very
have been
bad sound, and we didn't.
dining room table, but
What did I say?
kitchen
You said
table.
kitchen.
Yeah, but your dining room is like right there by the kitchen.
That's clearly not in the kitchen.
By the kitchen.
I
So
thought
is
of
my
it.
living room. My couch is right next to the kitchen. Is it my
So
kitchen? Is it
we're
my
watching
kitchen
TV
couch?
in his kitchen.
I kind of think of it as one big room.
We're sitting around Matt's kitchen couch.
I mean, I'm not judging it. I'm sitting at my dining room table right now with my
It's not your kitchen
over there.
table.
I use them interchangeably.
Look,
It's
I'm
actually
I'm in a bad mood because I just figured out there are no universities that offer degrees in heresiology.
Oh, we should start our own curriculum. Come to Super Dre's School of Heresiology.
that sounds like a course at Hogwarts.
Yeah, it's like Defense of the Dark Arts.
There'll be
Kind of is.
incantations.
That's
It's not
kind of
defense
going to be our show next week.
Yeah.
spicy. It's a spicy take.
You know, it's going to be controversial, but I don't know why. It's silly to me that it is. But anyway,
All right, Dre, get us out of here.
Okay, well, listen. If you have a topic that you want us to discuss, we brought this up before. Put it in the comments. Maybe we'll approach it. We'll have a listener contest on what topic. We'll have a little grab bag, and we'll discuss any topic who wins.
wait, what's the criterion for
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
winning?
Whoever I say wins. Like I don't know.
All right.
But I think we solved Barnabas. It should not be canon. I think we all agree on that. And anyone who brings it up in some kind of Christian argument doesn't really have a very good argument, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know that it comes up a lot. And my point was more just because it's traditional doesn't make it good. But anyway, you're closing us out. So
Yeah, so okay. And we're at the end. So what you need to do is stay curious and read stuff like the Epistle of Barnabas, stay enlightened, and go to the school of no, don't do that. And we will see you next week. God bless.